Tanks are some of the most fascinating vehicles a military can possess. They can weigh up to 70 tons and they can go 45 miles an hour while tackling most kinds of terrain with ease. However, those who know Murphy's Law know that what can go wrong will go wrong. So what happens when a tank gets stuck or needs repaired? Who do you call to recover your tank or to take down the statue of a dictator? Well, look no further, because this is the M88A1 Armored Recovery Vehicle. Tanks have been getting stuck ever since their debut. There was no purpose-built recovery vehicle in World War I. There were salvage tanks, which were essentially British Mark series tanks with attached booms and jibs to help move and repair damaged tanks. However, the idea of the armored recovery vehicle really came into its own during World War II. During the Second World War, the US would use vehicles such as the M31, a recovery vehicle based off the chassis of an M3 Lee. This would then be supplemented by the M32, which was a recovery vehicle based off a modified Sherman hull using a fixed position for operating the A-frame jib in place for where the turret would normally be. This design would be further improved upon with the M74 Armored Recovery Vehicle by using Sherman hulls with horizontal volute spring suspension to aid in the recovery capabilities, but for heavier post-war tanks. After World War II, the US would add to the recovery arsenal with the M578 Light Recovery Vehicle, a tracked vehicle based off of the M110 platform. Now, the M578 did an adequate job with recovering light tanks of the time. However, with larger tanks like the M48, M60, and M103, the US would need something bigger and, most importantly, stronger. The military would originally go with a recovery vehicle called the M51, which was based off the M103 heavy tank, but this design was less than ideal and it left a lot of room for improvement. So the US would go back to the drawing board for a vehicle that could handle all recovery operations, both big and small, but on a platform smaller than the M103. This would be the basis of the M88. The M88 traces its start back to 1954, when the Army would call for a new medium recovery vehicle. This would start the T-88 program, which would develop a vehicle from scratch. The T-88 and subsequent M88 would be a vehicle all of its own. While it would have some shared components from the M48 and M60, like the road wheels and engines, for all intensive purposes, it would be an entirely new platform. The vehicle would be built by Bowen McLaughlin York, and after 7 years of development, this is the vehicle they came up with.
We were in Fort Pickett, Virginia, deployed up there from Camp Lejeune. A tank had attempted to drive up a man-made hill and approach, but as he got up to the top, it got real narrow. I guess the tank driver wasn't paying attention, so part of his track started sinking off the side. Well, it got so far off the side, if they were going to move anymore, it was going to roll over on top of itself. We were called up. We had one M88, but we had to call in another M88 from the headquarters battalion that supported us. We had to hook up on the back of the tank across the lower approach to the road to keep it from rolling over. And then we came up on the front of it to pull it up over the road, busted a winch cable. But we got it out of there eventually. You know, most of the time there's a case of beer involved in pretty much any hookup. Whether you're pulling a tank, towing a tank, it's just a given. If you're a dummy, you got to pay for it. I'm Mike Lamb. I'm a supervisor here at the Tank Restoration Shop for the National Museum of Military Vehicles here in Dubois, Wyoming. My years of service was from 1982, where I went to boot camp, then became a tank mechanic and did that for a lot of years. Worked on these M88 retrievers and retired in 2006 as a chief warrant officer, as a project officer for the follow-on M88A2 from this type of vehicle. We were at the tank maintenance facility. Daily routines was moving tanks around, pulling them and pushing them with the M88A1, lifting armor decks and power packs out of M60 tanks to take them out and set them on the deck so you could do any type of maintenance you want to do. We'd have field exercises and myself and the crew would go out and follow the tank companies as they do the maneuvers, wait till something breaks down and then move up, take care of whatever's broken down. Might have to pull a pack, might have to pull track off, who knows what it is. The M88 is a workhorse of the Marine Corps, at least for the tank and the ordnance community. It's designed to pull wheeled and tracked vehicles. It's got the main winch on it, as you know, and then it's got the boom winch to pick stuff up. The crew in this vehicle is capable of recovering tanks that have gotten mired and can't get out by themselves. One of these M88A1s could pull an M60 tank fine. It had no problem with it. It had all the power it would ever need. We've actually hooked up at times in front of two tanks, daisy chained together, and could pull them. Be a little bit slower, but it could do it. When the M1 Abrams tank came along later in my career, we still had the M88A1s. We hadn't had the replacement for it yet, but we had the M1A1 Abrams tank. They're much heavier than this. To tow those, you had to have one in front and one in back. One in front to pull and one in back to brake. Because if you tried it just pulling it around like you would with an M60 tank, it would get it going, but you probably couldn't stop it. So the M88 series retrievers are stepped up in horsepower and torque and a stronger transmission than the M60 tanks. Basically, the engine is almost identical. It's just tuned a little bit heavier. The transmission is way bulkier, gear drive that is made for low torque, pulling heavy objects. Basically, the suspension on up is a custom design just to be an M88 retriever. Same way with the M88A2s on the same platform, but it's got a heavier suspension on it. It's beefed up with armor plating on it, side skirts with plating. The engine's turned way up, and transmission's beefed up a whole lot more to handle that weight of an M1 Abrams. They can handle them pretty good. I had another role as the M88A2 project officer for the Marine Corps. And in that role, I worked with my counterpart in the Army because we had like vehicles. We worked with the manufacturer, how they put everything together, how it was going to work with the Marines and the Army, all aspects of that vehicle. We would have meetings, frequent meetings with the manufacturer and our Army counterparts. During the time that we were building these vehicles, there came a point where we were almost to the end and had everything all squared away. And the Army came in on one of our meetings and he said, "We're going to get rid of the steps that are on the boom of the M88A2. And I said, "Really? Why?" And there was like, "Well, we have too many accidents with people falling off the booms, climbing up the steps." And I kind of chuckled and I'm like, well, Marines are keeping ours. They're there for a reason. He knew they were there for a reason, my counterpart did, but it was people over him that said, now they're coming off. So we ended up keeping our steps on our 88s. So fast forward to 2003, April 9th, in Ferdo Square, where Saddam's statue was standing and the people of Iraq were trying to pull him down and were unsuccessful in doing it. They were trying to throw ropes over his head and his arms and trying to pull him down to no avail. Well, there was a Marine, M88A2, standing by watching that decided, let's go help him. So they rolled up there with the boom up, with the steps on it, so the rigger could take a flag all the way up there to the top of the boom, throw it over Saddam's head, and put a chain around his neck so they could pull a statue down. Now that wouldn't happen that way. Probably might not have even happened without an M88A2 with steps. Well, it can't sleep more than 4 comfortably. 3's better. We called it a Winnebago for that reason. We had the luxury of getting 3 or 4 guys in there to sleep inside that M88. You know, it's a little bit cramped and it's a little bit hard, but it's better than getting soaking wet and freezing cold. I actually had a situation where there were 4 of us inside an M88, and this was on Mount Fuji with about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. And my company commander knocked on our door. We opened it. He said, "Hey, you got room for me?" I said, "No, sir." Click. He had to go back to us. I don't know what he was riding in, but I didn't care. We found out that those rubber tracks in that deep, wet snow, really slippery. You had to really pay attention to how you were driving and where you were driving. As the tanks moved off into the training area, we were left at the top of it as you would enter into the forest. I had this idea that, wow, they're so slick coming up, they probably are really slick going down. So we made ourselves M88A1 toboggan. So we'd start at the top and run it down the hill and then just let off of the gas. It'd all go quiet to an idle and just the wind going by and just sliding right down the hill. The last time the company commander came back in his Jeep where we were supposed to be, and he saw us. And I thought, oh man, my goose is cooked. He gave me the hard act, and then, kind of winked after that. Glad you guys stay busy. I had so many favorite memories. As a young enlisted guy, those were the best times in the Marine Corps. It was just tomfoolery all the time. We were just having fun, get our jobs done, obviously, and, have fun doing it, have a little prank on everybody, everybody's got to have their spidey senses up all the time. That's what Marines kind of do. We had a lot of deployments. Takes us out of the normal days of the week, from barracks to the workplace, out to the field where everybody's together 24 hours, doing everything together. That's where you get the camaraderie. Those years were the best.
Since its introduction in 1961, over 1,600 M88s have been built and it is currently serving with over 20 countries. And it's not hard to see why. Since its first combat debut in the Vietnam War, the vehicle has cemented itself as an essential tool to use, recover, and repair vehicles. Over the past few years, the U.S. military has been looking at upgrading the 88 even further in anticipation of the Abrams receiving heavier armor. While all this is still in development, these upgrades would likely result in the fielding of the M88A3. If or when these upgrades are adopted, that only means that the M88 will still have a job to do decades in the future. While this M88's military service is over, we still plan on using it long into the future, helping to restore other tanks here at the National Museum of Military Vehicles.